Good morning from London, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. A warm welcome to this webinar organized by CSIA. The topic of this webinar is Leading the Change in Board Diversity. And we have a very distinguished panel for you to discuss. We thought of some questions. The panelists will provide some insights and answers. You have the opportunity to contribute. Please put any questions you have in between in the chat. Sarah, the CEO of CSIA, will be kindly monitoring the chat and inform the panel of any questions you have. So a warm welcome. Let me shortly introduce the panelists to go through this. My name is Sabine Demkowski. Excuse the German accent. I live in London. We make the boards of the most ambitious organizations more effective. We created a platform for board evaluations and work with leading FTSE and DAX organizations. Some of you might have seen that our podcast, the Better Boards podcast series, is now on the platform of CSIA, and no one less than the president, Bode Ayeko, kicked off the podcast series for us. So a big thank you, Bode, once again for contributing. So let me introduce the panelists. Really honored to have Uto Ukpana on this panel. Uto is a legal practitioner, fellow of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, and a certified ethics officer, Ethics Institute at the University of Stellenbosch. She has been involved in the development and implementation of corporate governance codes across various sectors in Nigeria, as well as global best practice guidelines driven by the United Nations Global Compact. A warm welcome, Uto.
Thank you, Sabine.
We have Gillian Meller. Gillian has been a legal and governance director for many, many years and is a member of the executive directorate and the company secretary at MTR in Hong Kong. Before joining the company, Gillian was director of legal services for Metronet Rail Limited in London and a solicitor at CMS Cameron McKenna, also in London. A warm welcome, Gillian. We have Devendra, to be a truly global. Devendra, I have a huge passion for India. You know, I import chai tea, just to make you laugh. I just had a chai tea, drink it every morning. So a very warm welcome, Devendra. Devendra is a fellow member of the ICSI and a postgraduate in commerce from Pune University. He was elected to the Central Council of the ICSI for the term 2019 to 2022 and served as vice president of the ICSI for the year 2021 before being the elected president for the year 2022. Congratulations and a warm welcome.
Thank you, Sabine.
And we have Mohammed from Bangladesh. Mohammed Sanalau is a fellow and founder member of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries of Bangladesh, ICSB, and past president. Currently, he's the immediate past president and council member of ICSB in Bangladesh. A warm welcome, Mohammed. So after this short introduction, we want to give each panelist a short time to tell us what's going on when it comes to leading the change in board diversity, a topic that is really relevant all over the globe. we have a lot to do. Please keep your answers short, no more than max 2-3 minutes for everyone, to tell us what's going on in their respective countries. Jillian, maybe you want to kick off to tell us what's going on in Hong Kong?
Very happy to. Thank you, Sabine. And I'm afraid to say it's not great news to start with, because despite the efforts of organisations like the Women's Foundation, the 30% Club, and our own Chartered Governance Institute here in Hong Kong, the level of representation of women on the boards of Hong Kong listed companies remains pretty poor, I think, both in isolation and also when compared to other leading jurisdictions. So in 2021, we had only around 14% of the directors of Hang Seng index companies were women, so only 1 in 7 directors. And I think more shockingly for me, 1/3 of Hong Kong's listed companies, which is around 800 companies in total, have no women on their boards at all. And progress in the last few years has been, I'd say, pretty glacial, if I'm honest. So since 2011, from a very low base, female board representation has only risen by about 4%, whereas over the same period in other jurisdictions, the number of women directors has trebled. I'm not, well, I tend to be an optimist in life, though, so I would say that there is reason for hope. I think there's increasing focus on this issue and vocal noise from different stakeholders putting pressure on this issue. We have got, I would say, a growing number of enlightened board chairs in Hong Kong, and we are also seeing regulatory change. And just on that final point, in December of last year, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange published the conclusions of its most recent consultation exercise on changes to the Listing Rules Corporate Governance Code. And on diversity, the consultation concluded that a single gender board cannot be considered to be diverse. And so they've introduced, with effect from financial years starting this year, requirements that every listed issuer will have a 3-year period to comply. So they must appoint a director of a different gender by no later than the end of 2024. Secondly, issuers who made a commitment in their listing document to appoint a director of a different gender then must comply with that commitment. And thirdly, for IPO applicants, they must identify at least one director of a different gender for any listing submissions filed on or after the 1st of July 2022. So making progress, but if you distill that down, it still only means that listed companies will have to have one female director within a 3-year period. They have also, though, tightened up some of the disclosure requirements, which I think we know always help. So all listed companies are now required to set numerical targets and timelines for achieving gender diversity at the board level, are required to review their board diversity policies on an annual basis, and are also required to make disclosures on the gender ratios within the workforce, including the senior management, together with any plans or measurable objectives that the company has set for achieving board gender diversity. So this is a subject that I'm engaged on with my board at the moment in terms of what targets we should set and what timelines we should set for ourselves. And I sometimes ask myself, I think it's great that this regulatory change has been made and that hopefully we will start to see progress. But I really sort of reflect and ask myself, are the companies in Hong Kong, are the boards and the board chairs in Hong Kong ready for these changes? And I think there's still, again, I'm honest, a general nervousness about where we're going to find these additional female directors from, because we'll need at least 800 to fulfill the gaps in those companies that today have no women on their boards. Plus, obviously, it would be great to see some additional appointments, and we might need to replace retiring women. I would say that's misplaced nervousness, because I think, we make up 50% of the population, so it shouldn't be harder to find a female director than a male. And also, I think there are plenty of high quality candidates willing and able to take up board seats. And so I think we've got work to do in terms of nomination processes, in terms of female directors stepping up as role models, I think, and in terms of connecting women to the opportunities that exist. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jillian. Thank you so much. And I just saw in the chat that I have done something which would give me the death sentence some centuries ago. I forgot to introduce the president of the CSIA. A warm welcome, Bodhi. Forgive me for this lapse. Please do not hang me. We are in 2022. Bodhi, do you want to jump in and say some warm welcome words to everyone?
Well, thank you, Sabine. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the panelists and the participants. We are happy to welcome you to this webinar, which is of interest to all governance practitioners and all stakeholders in the corporate world. We know that the economy and the environment is very dynamic and things are changing very fast. And that is why it is necessary for every organization, and particularly the boards of the organizations, to review their strategies from time to time and to ensure that the board, which plays a crucial role in managing the affairs of each organization, will be in a position to deliver on the mandate of that particular organization as much as possible, also respond proactively to the concerns of stakeholders, and comply with the regulatory requirements. So it is necessary from time to time for every board to try as much as possible reassess its composition, reassess the competencies that they have and they need in order to overcome the challenges they are facing as much as possible, and try as much as possible to implement those strategies. It is not enough to have board diversity. What is very important is also inclusion. Inclusion is very key in the sense that when you bring in these diverse interests on the board, you must make sure that you give them the opportunity to play their role so as to contribute to the performance or effective performance of the organization. So it is nice, and that is why we are introducing this particular topic at the beginning of the year, so that we can be in a position to cope with the current challenges and be in a position to be productive and also achieve the mandate of the organization. As you are aware, Corporate Secretaries International organization is a federation of professional bodies. And the main purpose of that is to ensure that all professional institutes that are members will be in a position to implement best practices. And we are also opening up the space in addition to institutes all over the world that are members to corporate organizations through the Corporate Associate Program. So we expect that the corporate organizations that are interested in the development of and implementation of best practices will seize this opportunity to join the Corporate Secretaries International Association. We employ all the participants to visit our website. We have a lot of resources that can be useful in their day-to-day governance practice. We also have a quarterly journal that is called the Global Governance Voice. You need to just read the past and the current edition that will be out this month so that you can also know about the current developments, the trends in terms of best practices on governance matters. As much as possible, please, we encourage our members, professional institutes and members of the professional institute to realize one fact. Learning is a long life journey. It's not something that one should stop. As professionals, please try as much as possible to participate in all programs, webinars, training programs of various institutes, the ones that you belong in your country, and also the international organizations and stock exchanges, so that you can monitor the trends in the world and also implement best practices to the development of all stakeholders and also for the growth of the global economy. So it's on that note that I welcome you to this webinar. Please feel free, ask relevant questions. We have an array of experienced panelists at this program, and they will provide the relevant answers to your questions. So on that note, I thank you once again for this opportunity. Thank you, Sabine.
Thank you so much, Bode, and sorry for the lapse. So we had already the view from Hong Kong, a really good update what's going on from Jillian. Thank you so much. Maybe we move on. We stay with Nigeria. Uto, what do you see in Nigeria?
Thank you very much, Sabine, and I hope everyone can hear me. I will take it from where Gillian stopped. I believe that there's a lot of optimism. This is a marathon, so we still have long ways to go in Nigeria. But it's good to note that there's an appreciable level of consciousness and their deliberate efforts. If I start with gender, just to say that diversity, of course, we know goes beyond gender. Speaks about age, speaks about ethnicity, speaks about various demographics, and also inclusion. Also talks about what do we do with that diversity when we have it. So beginning with gender, there is that remarkable consciousness, appreciable consciousness within the country. You know, if I step back and look at how this has come to where we are now, in Nigeria, unlike most jurisdictions, corporate governance evolved faster through the sectors. And there wasn't a central movement. But in more recent times, there's been a central consciousness driven, and now we have what we call the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance. However, the sector regulators are still very influential in driving good governance across the private sector. And so you'll find that financial services had an early start with the Central Bank of Nigeria evolving the code and setting certain requirements, particularly across diversity. And so you find that in the financial services sector, you have a lot more women on boards than in other sectors. And 2021 was particularly a good year. If I recall correctly, about 6 banks named female CEOs. Wow. Some were the first in their bank's history, over 36 years and much longer. So this is really a remarkable progress. And you also look at the chairs of some of the Nigerian banks, and you'll see that they have progressively appointed a number of female chairs. One bank in particular, when the female chair retired, they appointed another female chair. So there's tremendous progress that we're seeing in the financial services sector. And like I said, they've had a head start and they've been quite consistent. Across other sectors, we're also seeing a lot of progress in terms of gender. But I must pause here to say that Nigeria is also a big hub for tech companies. And we see that a lot of female members on the boards and in management of tech companies, particularly, I mean, we have a thriving youth hub. I mean, before we started, we were talking about how Nigeria is such a huge market, not just for the present, but for the future as well. And how the boards of these companies, which would have more younger directors, are also infusing diversity because you not only need those who are the typical directors we would look out for, but diversity means that you have a blend. You have those who are not your orthodox director candidates. And so we're seeing that there is an infusion of that, particularly across the new business areas that are evolving. I would also like to say that one of the things that works best for companies beyond the gender, there's still a lot of work to be done. And we see that while there are no specific gender targets, and most companies adhere to global standards, which aim for 30%, we're not there yet, I must say. So a lot of companies are setting gender targets, boards of companies are setting gender targets and striving to meet them. If I come back home, so for us, MTN has footprint in 20 countries across Africa. We have set gender targets for for all the opcos that we must have 50% representation, not just on the boards of all the entities, but also in management by 2030. This is so that there is a deliberate effort to make sure that this is infused into the organization. And not just that, also generational equality, which is very important, because boards need to be populated across the generations, because each generation brings value to board deliberations. And looking back at Nigeria, 2 years ago, there were events that triggered the world. And these events were precipitated and driven by youth. And that tells us that, in fact, in local parlance, it is called Sorosoki. That means speak up. And this has been infused into the boards because now the youth want to be heard. They're not just, they may look different from your regular board candidates, but they want to be heard and they bring a lot of value. So it's important to have the right age demographic on boards that bring value. For instance, for us in tech, it's a very dynamic sector. Even financial services, now they're competing with the fintech companies. So a lot of the lines are blurred in terms of the business landscape. And you do need people who bring diverse experience, diverse knowledge. And this is one of the things that boards of Nigerian companies are focused on. And I believe that we will see a lot more of this in the coming years. There's a lot of optimism in the air. I mean, if you know us in Nigeria, we never say die. And so there's that optimism that there's going to be that consistency, but boards need to be focused and boards need to put this on the front burner of their agenda and of their deliberations, and not just have, tokenism, but have make sure that it's inclusive and everyone has a voice and that they are heard. And so the landscape in Nigeria is looking very positive across the sectors. And but boards have a mandate to ensure that this is consistent and that this is the future of how boards look at the skills, the experience, and of course, look at gender diversity targets and set those mandates for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Uto, for this optimistic outlook. We can. I'm glad that it's so positive and optimistic. And there are some very important points here, which we will come back to later. Diversity is so much more than gender, of course. And in the Western world, we do not necessarily think about this generational diversity, which I think is a very, very important point as we are all talking about digitization. So thank you so much for this. Shall we move on to India? Devendra, do you want to give us some insights into the current status of change in board diversity in India?
Sure, Sabine. Sure. I'd like to do that. First, my warm regards to board for being appointed or elected as president of CSIA. Congratulations to him. I hope I am audible. Yeah, thank you. Let me tell you, when it comes to diversity, India is the place wherein you can see around 121 different languages which are spoken, and we have got the highest number of people who are working in India. So when it comes to diversity of the country, I think most diverse country would be India, because a lot different people with different religion, different languages spoken, they live together, and we have unity and diversity in Indian culture. So I think in India, the diversity or more of inclusionness is the important aspect when it comes to corporates. So let me tell you the Indian perspective. Since 2014, we had made a mandatory requirement for listed and bigger companies to have one woman director. Even though we started with one woman director, there is no legal requirement of having 30% of gender diversity, like women directors of 30%. But yes, with one director being mandatory since 2014, So for last 6 years, 6 to 8 years, we are following that one woman on the board. So the diversity has started since 2014, and now we can see that in many of the companies there are a good number of women directors sitting on the board and playing their role in creating the diversity. As rightly pointed out by Uto, I think it is not about gender, it is about having the technical background also. So few people who are technical in nature, few people who are independent in nature should form part of the board. So since 2014, we have made it mandatory to have independent directors on the board, and their role has been expanding day in and day out. Let me tell you the culture here. So now there is a system of government wherein every person who wants to become an independent director has to register himself. And there is a requirement of undergoing a proficiency test. And that proficiency test is based on technical topics as well as topics in respect of corporate governance. So we have independent directors who are technical in nature, so very good in the business in which they work, as well as we have got few people, and I'm really happy to note on this platform that many company secretaries, like chartered secretaries for a few of the countries, are acting as independent directors on the board and giving that diversity to the board in a very effective manner. So I think that is one point which I wanted to inform you. Plus, there are provisions in India which says that for audit committee, for example, if a company is having an audit committee, the committee for doing audits and finance related things, there is a requirement that the director should have knowledge about finance and accounts. And so it is coming out of law, not out of practice. So we have made the changes in law to include these technical points to be included in the appointment of independent directors. So these are the few things which are working out in India, and we are having a good diverse boards in India. Inclusiveness, I would definitely say that India being one of the biggest democracy in the world, I think inclusiveness of people in activities of country as well as management of the company do play a vital role. In India, there is a legal requirement in few of the companies wherein the proportional representative directors are appointed. So minority shareholders, to protect their rights, few of the directors are appointed on the board of corporates. So on the corporates which are having some thresholds. So that is giving a inclusionness of minority shareholders. Plus there is a concept, a formal concept, legal concept of nominee director. So financial institutions who are lending institutions, or even some PE funding which is done through an agreement, all those people will get appointed as nominee director to protect the interest of those classes. So they are on the board of corporates, and it is only one board which is now recognized. So board of directors consist of only one board. So there is no secondary board, or directors are the people who are appointed on the board of the company. So the top notch. So nominee directors do form part of that particular board. So their representation is there on the board. So that creates a lot of diversity and inclusionness. Going forward, I think a couple of things which may be included in future. I don't know, at present it is not there, but employees, who are one of the most important stakeholders of any corporate. So there is no inclusionness on the board from the employee side. So one director maybe in future, we may discuss with the government of India. So one director who would be representing employees of the company. So that can be one of the idea wherein we can have more inclusionness in the company. There are disclosure requirements wherein every year, every director has to tell how many training sessions he has undergone, what is his technical expertise. Everything has to be recorded and has to be communicated to all the shareholders. So in the annual report, which is prepared in Indian companies, we have to mention all the details. So I think a lot of things are coming up. So diversity in the board is most important, and India is on the job and doing its bit to have a diverse board on the corporates. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Devendra. Really, I follow the chat a bit, and lots of admiration for the progress. I have to say this this register for independent directors is also something where you are very advanced. I haven't seen this in the Western world, to be honest, and I think it's a huge step forward. So thank you so much, Devendra. And then we have Mohammed from Bangladesh. Can you give us a short, really a short statement of what's going on in Bangladesh, Mohammed?
Thank you, Dr. Sabine. Bangladesh is a small country, and we have only 348 public listed companies operating in Bangladesh, and more than 1,000 private limited companies are operating. So eventually, there is no regulatory requirements in our country to maintain the gender discrimination. In this respect, even though around 10% directors are representing the women, the 10%, most of them are working as an independent director or nominee director. Few of them also works as an entrepreneur's representative or the shareholding director. So here, the Bangladesh Securities and Exchange Commission is the main regulatory body. They established the corporate governance guideline in 2006. Thereafter, they reviewed in 2012, and later on in 2018, they established the corporate governance code 2018, and that is a major changes they made in the rules. And now it is a mandatory that every public listed company will have to maintain 20% independent directors. Even though this is not in line with the global practice, however, we are improving. Gradually, we are improving. The situation is improving, but the criteria, what would be the percentage of the male and female, that has not been determined. Only the given the no discrimination. So here, the government is now also thinking about, the government is encouraging the women to come to the corporate management. So here we are expecting the regulatory reforms, particularly the Companies Act 1994. Definitely it will be updated very soon. And the Securities and Exchange Commission is also working in this regard. And in fact, the Bangladeshi, most of the women, eventually they do not like to go for work. That is one of the causes. And not only this, but the environment is changing. The government is all the times, as you know, our leader of the country is a woman. In this respect, she all the times is encouraging the people, the women, to come forward. And hopefully this would be changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. So we can jump straight into our panel discussion with this excellent overview around the globe. Let's kick off with our first question. What is the strategic role of the board in promoting diversity and inclusion? And maybe Julian, you want to kick off with answering this question. So the question is, what's the strategic role of the board in promoting diversity and inclusion?
Thanks, Sabine. I'm very happy to kick this off. And I'm pleased that you used the word strategy in the question, because I think companies do need to think about D&I as a strategic issue. And I mean that both in terms of working out which aspects of diversity are most relevant to them as a company. And I realize in my opening remarks, I focus mainly on gender, because that's a really hot topic here in Hong Kong at the moment. But as other panelists have mentioned, of course, for different companies at different times, different aspects of diversity may be most relevant. But I think also boards need to look out to their different stakeholder groups and identify what aspect of diversity and inclusion might be relevant for their customers, what aspect might be relevant for the local communities perhaps, and certainly what aspect might be relevant for their staff. And I think, why is it important for the board to get involved and to set this tone from the top? Well, of course, what the board itself looks like, I think, tells people from the outside, how might a company feel? What does a company value? But I think it's also important that the board reaches down into the organisation and understands the data of the people that they have within their organisation, so that they can try and ensure that there is a pipeline for the future, both in terms of their own senior management, but also potentially developing directors who could sit on other company boards. I think then boards have a role in looking at the different levers that can be pulled both internally and externally to try and improve the D&I situation. So internally, that could be through training or awareness raising. It could be through the setting up of networks. It could be through looking at allies groups. It could be looking at how technology can better be employed to try and improve diversity and inclusion. And finally, I think the boards have got a really important role to play in terms of measuring progress and ideally reporting on that, again, both internally and externally.
Thank you for kicking this off. It is, you know, when we conduct these board evaluations, I can see that diversity and inclusion is an important topic, but boards are not always taking the steps, are not necessarily always doing the actions, or feel at times even quite helpless. What am I supposed to do about it? And I see Devendra, do you want to say something to this? What have you observed? I see you agreeing with this. How can we make sure that boards really become active and actually do something about it?
Actually, I completely agree with what you, the point you said, but it has to start at board level. So I always believe that for having good diversity in the company, the board should have a diverse members. So different views can be exchanged in the board meeting, and then it can be transferred to the entire company. So I think, and anyways, nowadays, even in Indian culture, you must be aware that we have a lot of family-owned companies. So in India, the family culture is very much integrated with the business. So nowadays, even the government authorities have made it mandatory to have non-executive chairman on the board. So chairman of the board would be non-executive. He is not the person who is actively involved in the activities of the company. As well as a few of the regulations recently which have changed, like independent directors would be approving the related party transactions. So these are the few changes which are happening in India, which is creating importance of different people on the board. So diversity on the board is getting created with such things, and board needs to work on diversity so that it get participated in the down level. So I think India is definitely doing well, and I think these are the things which can be borrowed further. Thank you.
No, thank you. What's your view, Otto? What do you see in Nigeria? How are boards really promoting diversity and inclusion? Some real insights from what's really happening in the boardrooms.
Thank you very much, Sabine, and I couldn't agree more with Devendra. In a country of, if we believe the stats, over 200 million people, you have quite a huge pool to choose from. So sometimes when I hear, particularly with gender representation, or we don't have the women we're looking for, I actually believe boards need to consciously expand the pool of their search. And again, because typically on boards, you're looking for people with specific skills. But as the pandemic has taught us that we should predict the unpredictable. And that we should ask ourselves, what do we want this board to look like in 5 years, in 10 years, and proactively plan and really expand that pool. Again, when I spoke about generational representation, in 10 years, I may not be the appropriate board member for a particular board, and that skill may lie with someone else, or that skill may lie with a pool of other individuals. So boards really need to proactively expand their pool, the search pool, because the pipeline issue is a major challenge. for a lot of boards. I also think we can't underestimate the role of the chairman and the nominating committee, or the committee responsible for nominating directors. They have a huge role. So for instance, the chairman plays a leading role when it comes to board appointments and also inclusion in the boardroom. So he needs to be able to manage the affairs, deliberations, and ensure that typically every director brings his views on board. I read a recent survey by PwC conducted in 2019, where they said that the responses from 41% of directors that they surveyed indicated that at least one director should not be re-elected, should not be presented for re-election, and did not really contribute in a manner that was value adding. And yet nothing was done about this. So the role of this is where the nomination committee needs to do thorough screening of potential candidates to ensure that these are candidates who are going to bring the flavor, the value that will enhance the performance of the company. And of course, like I said, the chairman has a huge role to play. Again, if the board does not achieve diversity, cannot hold management accountable for not achieving diversity targets, because you must lead from the top. There is tone at the top, and it's incumbent on the board to achieve the tone it sets for itself, the target it sets for itself before it can hold others accountable. And finally, I believe that boards that have significant influence need to set that target. Similar to what they have in India, for premium board companies listed on the Nigerian Exchange Limited, there are certain criteria. One of those things that they need to do is to take what is called a fiduciary awareness certification test. And directors have to take it, and they have to pass before the company is elevated to the premium board of the Nigerian Exchange Limited. Now, this ensures that directors are conscious of what it means to be on the board and the things they need to do to achieve diversity and inclusion. And again, like I said, the chairman and the nominating committee have a key role to play, because otherwise it will just be, you have a policy that's really not doing you any favors.
Thank you so much, Uto. Now, in order to achieve this, and you all alluded to it, so it seems to be a phenomenon around the globe, is there a need, in your views, to transform the board structures and cultures to really accommodate diversity and inclusion? Do we have to do more, changing processes, structures? Do you want to kick off, Devendra, because you made some excellent points in our preparation?
No. I just lost the network. So can you just repeat the thing? I just lost my network. There's some problem.
Okay. So the question is, now that we heard from the strategic role in promoting diversity and inclusion, is there a need to transform the structures and the cultures of the board to accommodate diversity and inclusion?
Absolutely. There is a requirement of creating a robust structure in the board, so that by law itself the board will be diverse. Actually, there will be a lot of reservations from the existing board, or the board which is of a family-owned business. They will definitely have reservations over this. But once the law is framed in such a way that we will have diverse people giving inputs to the board, because see, the funds are coming from public, so all listed companies or corporates which are having public interest, like heavy borrowings or public listed companies, they are getting funds from outside, but they are managed by very few people. So I think there has to be litigation support. So there has to be a law which has to create a complete diverse board, and one step slowly. It cannot happen overnight. So I think step by step, few of the countries are definitely moving towards having a variety of the board, and that will definitely add value, because ESG valuation nowadays, so governance becomes very, very important in valuation of a company, and with diverse board only. So that culture needs to be imbibed in the companies, that if you have diverse boards, you may not have profits, but you will have value, you will have sustainability, and going forward, you will be valued very high. And investor support would be much more to a non-ESG based company. So I think diverse board will definitely have to be done through a legal process. So that is what I think a structure can be defined through law.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Does anyone from the panel want to contribute to this question? I just have an eye now on the time, and we have still quite a bit to go. Does anyone else from the panel wish to contribute to this question?
Sabine, just a very short comment here. I think there's, in terms of culture, there's a degree of awareness raising to do, certainly with boards in Hong Kong. And that might be on issues such as unconscious bias and the idea that sort of younger people, can't possibly be qualified to contribute to a listed company board. And yet with issues like technology and ESG being at the top of board agendas, I think those, might be exactly some of the people that you need. And I think also a bit of training around what's the real value of diversity and inclusion, and how ultimately does it contribute to better governance? Because while a lot of this is, an underlying issue of fairness and equality, we're really doing this to create quality boards, and quality boards need the right mix of skills, experience, and perspectives.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, Otto, you really alluded to it. How is the board expanding its director search to maximize diversity and broaden the board competencies in critical areas such as technology, HR management, cybersecurity, ESG issues? So what are you seeing, Otto, maybe in terms of that the search process is having a wider net from the start?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gillian, for mentioning the last point about awareness training, because first, it is what you understand that you will begin to work on. Also, I believe, the traditional methods of actually sourcing board directors may not work that well again in the future, or need to be enhanced. So typically you would get consulting firms, or board members would typically suggest names that you will look through. But I believe that with the emerging issues, for instance, technology is key, ESG is key. Cybersecurity, I mean, there's an overhanging threat consistently now, because we live in a different world than we lived in 20, 30 years ago. And also those unconscious biases need to be dropped. And this is where there needs to be first a deliberate focus by the board to change the mindset from a homogeneous board where everyone is similar. And, yesterday we spoke about how you're afraid of things that are different. But now you have to embrace things that are people who are different, who have different perspectives, who have different experience, who don't look like you, whose their hairstyle may not be as neat and well coiffed as ours, but who possess the skills, who may not be ready to wear a tie to work, or who may not even be willing to sit down for a 5-hour meeting, who believe that you can handle what you need to do in 2 hours. That is what we need to bring into the boardroom. And again, proactive preparation, expanding the pool to say again, what are the skills we need? Where is that? What's our strategy over the next 5, 10 years? What kind of business opportunities are we willing to explore? What markets do we intend to go into? And purposefully, deliberately look for people who possess those skills. If I come back home in Nigeria, like I said, we have a population of 200 million or more. you cannot tell me that you cannot find those skills amongst the 200 million individuals that live in this country. And sometimes you need to groom those skills. You need to monitor what potential board candidates are doing at a particular time. Are they doing things that will be relevant? Is there a way you can influence their progress? What are the things you need to do? So boards need to be proactive in this space. Also, I believe that the policies, let's say the appointment and succession policies, need to be clear on the sort of candidates and the sort of skills and experiences that are required in the boardroom. Also, even when you're, if you're outsourcing to a consultant, you need to define clearly who are the candidates you're looking for. What does diversity mean to the board? Yes. How will they ensure that that once they achieve their diversity targets, they can extract the value that that they need to from the individuals they have on their boards? How do they ensure that once the board has set those standards and achieved it, they're able to drive it across the business, make it part of their everyday activities of the company? I think is very important because, like we mentioned, those areas, ESG, cybersecurity, technology, and other areas are critical issues, and we do have the skills and need to identify those skills that can benefit the company.
Thank you so much. I just saw a question actually in the chat, which is also a good coincidence. It's also our question, our final question before we move to the Q&A, maybe some short answers. Does board diversity improve decision-making, and can it drive enhanced financial performance? So do we have any evidence that the diversity is not just a moral obligation, but actually it brings hard financial results? Mohammed, any evidence from that you are seeing in Bangladesh?
It is very difficult to say. Because of that, I didn't find any these types of instance that the in fact the financial position is absolutely depend on the performance of the business. At the same time, it is depend on the parameters, that is strategic planning, did the board of directors. The board eventually is responsible to look after the financial nitty-gritty, as well as the audit committee plays a very important role there. The guy who is the chairman of the audit committee, he is an independent director, and most of the members are the non-executive directors. Therefore, the financial matters, absolutely the matters relating to the board, and board can disseminate the information when it is required as per the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Any evidence? When we discussed this webinar, I said, Utu, there is some excellent academic work done in Nigeria, providing actually evidence that diversity has a positive impact on the performance of a company.
Absolutely. So some scholars have done various studies using Nigerian companies in insurance, using some companies in some family-owned businesses, and also looking at companies in the financial services sector. And they looked at the impact of gender diversity, geographical diversity, and just to mention that in the public sector in Nigeria, there's what we call federal character. And so what this means is that in state-owned entities, appointments are made to have a fair demographic representation across the geopolitical zones in Nigeria. That is for state-owned entities. And but this focuses on the private sector, where federal character is not infused, but it is based on merit, it is based on the experience, it is based on the knowledge and criteria set by the company. And so it showed that across those sectors, that appointing more female board members actually led to a positive impact on the return on equity of those companies over time. In fact, in some companies, it led to about 40% increase on the return on, which is really good stats. And it also showed that age representation was also had a positive and significant impact on those companies. And so it just shows, and I think this has encouraged a lot more companies to look at diversity from a holistic perspective, because, on the gender issue, men and women process issues differently. And we are seeing in Nigeria changes because of the increase in the number of women represented on the board. So you now see a lot of companies have a creche because they have policies that promote fairer labor practices for women. So you're seeing that paid maternity leave has increased in some companies to 6 months in some cases. And these are brought about by infusing women who tend to empathize more, and who are not afraid to speak their minds, who are able to take a stand on issues. And even though these are typically male-dominated boards, and we've seen the positive impact this is having on companies who have taken the bold step to encourage and promote diversity and inclusion.
Thank you so much, Uto. We have to move on to allow our fantastic participants to answer some questions. A final remark maybe from Devendra, anything you would like to add? Very short insights from India.
Very short. So we have been talking about all positive things about diversity in the board, but there is also one fallback. Like when diverse people come together, they may not come to a conclusion when it comes to taking a very important decision. So in India, there is one concept called as familiarization program. So whenever a director is inducted on the board, he gets familiarized with the activities of the company. So I think that is one way wherein different people can be brought on one table to see the things in a way, and then the discussions can take place, and we can have a better, after good discussion, we can have a better decisions. And it may not be giving profits, but definitely it will add a value when we have a diverse board. So no profit proof that diverse board will have better profits, but in terms of valuation, I believe in years to come, it will add a value to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Our panelists made some excellent points, fantastic insights from different countries, real practical examples of what's working. I think a huge contribution to spreading good practice around the globe, something that is close to the heart of Bode, the president of the CSIA. So I think this panelist has achieved that. A big, big thank you. Any questions?
Sabine, yes, we've got some questions from the audience. One of the questions was, do you think state-owned publicly traded companies should lead the diversity initiatives for paving the way for other private sector organizations? And that is from Nazrul in Bangladesh.
Thank you.
Particularly in Bangladesh, the state-owned organizations, they are working in the country, but eventually their board of directors representing by the government of Bangladesh. And most of the directors are representing from the high officials of the government. A certain percentage, particularly 20%, is coming from the corporate, according to Corporate Governance Code 2018. Here, the performance relating to the state-owned organizations compared to the public listed companies who are working, the main difference is that most of the decisions are coming from the government and they influenced by the governmental decisions. And the practice, we also pointed it out, if we do not maintain the corporate governance code and the public issue rules properly, or the listing rules, in this respect, ultimately, it is very difficult to compare with the comparable figure. Here, the government is also thinking, the Securities and Exchange Commission is also thinking, at the same time, all the times the business houses is also speaking on this issue. Hopefully that would be minimized in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on that question? Because any views from anything you've seen in your country working, that public-private companies are at the forefront of these developments, or is it actually other companies who are at the forefront of developments?
In fact, in Bangladesh, the private limited companies number is very publicly listed companies number in the state-owned organization is very few, not more. But eventually, most of the companies are private limited companies. Private limited companies are governed by the Companies Act. Our Companies Act is now reviewing. So hopefully, even some issues relating to the corporate governance issue, like the CDBL issue, these are not involved with the Companies Act as of today. In this respect, the corporate governance is not only applicable, should not be only applicable for the public listed company. This needs to be included in all the private and public sectors. Therefore, there is a change required. We are expecting the change. In private limited company, most of the companies are nature is in private, and therefore it is very difficult to ascertain about their governance practice. That is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
However, that would be minimized in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Any other questions you are seeing, Sarah?
Yes, thank you, Sabine. There's also a question from Fulasadi, who says that Uto mentioned a fiduciary certificate for directors in Nigeria before organizations can be listed, and wanting to find out if she could give more insights on how that happens. It seems like a very similar situation in India, where you talked about a proficiency test, Devendra. So it seems like if we're looking at the diversity of skills that's required, that might be quite an interesting way to go for boards. Maybe Uto can comment and
Devendra.
give some.
Yes, so thank you. Just to clarify that what is the fiduciary awareness certification testing? So there are two boards on the Nigerian Exchange Limited. There's the main board and there's the premium board. So companies get listed on the main board. However, part of what the premium board does is it establishes you as an organization that promotes excellent and the highest standards of corporate governance. And there are quite a few steps to do that. And one of those steps includes your board members taking what is called the fiduciary awareness test, where they have to sit for a test. It's about 40 random questions spread across different aspects of corporate governance, from risk management to your understanding your fiduciary role as a director. And it's all encompassing, looks at the various codes and your knowledge as a director of what you need to understand to be on the board. And directors are expected to have at least 70% in this test. And once you hit this target, and of course, like I said, the other elements of the process, then the company is elevated from the main board to the premium board. And so this sets those companies, they're probably about 9 or 10 companies on the premium board, or a little over that currently. So it's a premium league essentially, or what you would say the Premier League of companies on the Nigerian exchange, which sets them apart from the main board. And you have to recertify every 3 years. Just to be sure that your knowledge is still current, because of course the ecosystem continues to evolve. And so this is what is done in Nigerian companies. So if you go on the NJX portal, you will see the companies listed on the premium board. And I'm happy to state that our organization so far is the only company that listed directly on the premium board without having to go through the main board. And it's a very involved process, and I believe quite invaluable to the members of the board of directors, particularly where you have directors who are not necessarily from Nigeria on your board as well, and even those in Nigeria, not expecting that their residual knowledge will suffice, but to actually be tested on their knowledge. So I hope that explains how it works.
Thank you, and congratulations to your company.
Thank you.
So the question was asked regarding the Indian perspective. Let me tell you that there is an open database. So that database of independent directors is accessible to all the companies. So a company can go and search for an independent director which they want in a particular field, or a particular person who has worked in, for example, chemical company. So they may look for a person who has been independent director in chemical company. So that entire database is available, and that director can undergo proficiency test. And once he passes that particular test, he has been given 1 year for passing that particular examination. And then his database is open for the companies to access, and they can appoint only those directors who are registered on that database. So it is a mandatory requirement to go through this process. So we are making this mandatory for directors to go through this process of proficiency test.
Thank you so much. Absolutely excellent points here. We have to come to a close, and I would like to invite our panelists to make some short closing remarks. Who would like to start? Maybe Julian?
Sure, very happy to. Thank you. I think what's really struck me this afternoon is the progress that we're making. So while I perhaps started off with not so good news on gender diversity in Hong Kong, I think it's been a very positive discussion this afternoon with lots of ideas for us all to take away. But I think, Uto mentioned research that have been done in Nigeria. I've seen other similar research done around the world to show, real financial benefits in terms of diversity on boards and without organizations. So please, everyone, let's keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Closing remark maybe from Bangladesh, Mohammad.
Thank you. That is a very good program, and eventually that is an opportunity for us to know many things by today's program, and hopefully particularly relating to the independence director, what Indian experience, like also that is in our country, whenever we would like to appoint an independent director. Recently, Securities and Exchange Commission has given the option. Those who are interested, they will apply, and if they feel suitable, then they allow, and thereafter he or she would be appointed. This is the culture, and eventually mostly depends on the board. The board chairman is the guy who will choose the independent directors with the help of the Nomination and Remuneration Committee.
Thank you.
And definitely, this is also experience we have come to learn from other countries. And thank you to Mr. Bodhi and the moderator for arranging such a wonderful program. Thank you.
Thank you. A closing remark from Nigeria, from India?
Uto, may I?
Please go ahead. I saw you had unmuted.
Yeah, so thank you very much. It was a wonderful discussion, and we got to know many points from other countries also. And see, we are closely, Institute of Company Secretaries of India is closely associated with the government. So we fall under one of the ministries. So we can approach government and ask them for certain changes in the policies of the government. So to have more diverse boards on the corporate. And definitely institute per se is working on providing various trainings to the directors of the country, top-notch directors of the country, maybe public companies or the government-owned companies. And that way, the institute is doing its own bit to have diversity in the board of corporates. And I think this will definitely add value in the years to come. So thank you, all the panelists. I really enjoyed being part of this wonderful discussion. Thank you, Zara, and Sabain, you were fantastic as a moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. Closing remark, Uto, from Nigeria.
Thank you very much. This has really been quite insightful. And I'm just soaking in all the knowledge that has been shared by the panelists and by you, Sabine. Thank you very much. And of course, by our president. While diversity and inclusion, because it's an evolving area, we've seen that there's appreciable progress. But again, like every other thing that needs, I recall when risk management came into the scene, boards made it a priority. So diversity and inclusion also has to be a top agenda item that the board needs to keep in its sights. And we can't re-emphasize and underscore the importance of the roles of the board chair and the nomination committees. But in all this, we should not lose sight of the key role that chartered secretaries must play. And they shouldn't feel helpless, because the chartered secretaries and board secretaries contribute, they are the advisors to the board. And so even in terms of board induction, continuous development, they must have this in their handbook. And of course, ensure that keeps this in its sights. So I also know that, for instance, in Nigeria, the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators is developing a pool of independent directors. And who should know better than those who are the corporate governance professionals, chartered secretaries. I'm also aware the Institute of Directors is also maintaining a pool. So to expand, boards need to expand their pipeline, look at evolving issues and ensure that they proactively plan for tomorrow. And make sure that when they get those qualified and suitable directors, they actually extract and ensure that they contribute effectively to board deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I also want a huge thank you to the panelists. You know, a lot of the corporate governance discussions are still driven by the West. When we look for literature, a lot of the literature is still very dominated by Western countries. And I would like to encourage all of our listeners from around the globe, from countries, to really join this debate. Rise up. It was very illuminating for me. Excellent work is taking place. You know, when you are sitting here in London, there is still this view that it's at the center of the universe. It is not the case. So I think it's very important that all of you from Nigeria, from India, from Bangladesh, really step up, join in the debate. Do not be in any way think that different work is happening in other countries. You do an excellent job, and I think really progressive ideas are coming through. It's really important work that is taking place to spread good practice around the world. So thank you to the president of the CSIA. Thank you to the CEO of CSIA, to bring all of this together so that we can have such a fantastic discussion and spread good practice, ideas, inspire around the globe. A big thank you from my side. And I hand over to the president and the CEO of CSIA.
Before Zara will speak, let me thank Sabine for moderating this session. I also most especially thank the panelists. One key takeaway is for all of us to note one thing. There must be a remarkable transformation from the existing homogeneous board to a diverse board. That is the way that our organizations and also the stakeholders will benefit. I encourage all the governance practitioners in all parts of the world, and also those who believe in corporate governance, to try as much as possible to spread this gospel. There is the need for us to have diversity on our board, and particularly inclusion. Diversity is like an invitation of a guest to your house. Inclusion is actually entertaining that particular guest so that the guest will feel at home. So not only having a diverse board, but ensure that those diverse stakeholders that are on the board are also given the opportunity to play their role so that they can add value to the board, also to the organization and the several stakeholders. So it's on that note that I will hand over to Zara as to give the closing remarks. Zara.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think you said that very well. To explain the difference between diversity and inclusivity. And I think we really did not have enough time, if I can listen to all the contributions from the panelists and also all the questions that I see on the chat, to really dissect this topic. It's going to be something that's going to be around for a very, very long time. And I think the important point is that when it comes to diversity, as you've mentioned, Bodhi, that is one aspect of it, making sure that your board is diverse, but ensuring that that culture is promoted right through the organization. That, I think, there is still quite a lot of work that needs to be done in both developed world and the developing world. But I hope that this discussion today will have shed some light on what can be done to develop this culture. I hope that there's been some more information on the impact on company performance, and thank you for the statistics that we've seen. It's great to know that there already has been improvement seen in terms of company performance, where we have women directors or women CEOs, and also the important point of how boards can drive this process. So as we close the event out today, I want to take a moment to just give a very special thanks to each of our panelists, Gillian, Uto, Mohammed, Devendra. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your insights, and also your recommendations with us and your thoughts for the future. Also, a very big thank you to Dr. Sabine for her competent management of the speakers, to ensure that we get all the different country perspectives, and that is how we share our knowledge and best practices. A huge thank you also to our President, Bodhi Ayeko, for sponsoring this event, and to Tayo, Yakubu, and the ICSAN team for everything that they did to prepare for the event. I know that there's a lot of work that goes on in the background, and we certainly appreciate all that hard work. And of course, a very, very special thank you to our audience who's joined us from all over the world. We appreciate all the engagement from the audience and the questions. And for those that we didn't get time to answer, we will ensure that we answer that on email and give you some feedback on that. So I hope you will join us on the 15th of March. We have our webinar on gender diversity. And there's also a lot of other events that's coming up this year. So keep an eye on our website. And we will be exploring other topics in this changing landscape of corporate governance. So on behalf of the CSIA, ICSAN, Better Boards, and our panelists, we wish everyone all the best. Have a lovely day or evening, and stay safe. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Vishesh.